Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I, Ken, read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to, once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through, and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. Our next letter comes from Liam. Liam writes, firstly, thank you for your content. It brought clarity during a time of confusion, helping me understand my experiences through the lens of attachment. Wishing you and everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you. And also for those of you that celebrate holidays outside of Christmas, happy holidays to those of you as well too. Liam continues, here's my story. So I'm going to call myself Liam, and the woman in my story, her name is Sarah. I met Sarah in October 2022 in our small town when we bumped into each other while walking our puppies. Sarah came across as a well-structured woman. She was working full-time, she was passionate about fitness, which meant her physique was well-maintained. And she had this introverted, cheeky personality that caught my eye. It was a very brief meeting as Sarah mentioned she had to rush off, but she took my business card for my pet services. She got in touch later and we started a consistent business relationship that initially stayed professional over November and December, although slowly became more friendly and personal as a connection between us both as a result of our habitual contact and our good harmony. December and January comes around and I receive a call from an unknown number. It was Sarah's parents, distressed, asking for help with the dogs. I accepted and this work continued over the next couple of weeks. While helping, Sarah's parents confided that she was unfortunately struggling with, oh dear, struggling with alcohol addiction. Throughout this period, Sarah began chatting with me during my visits, sharing that she'd lost a partner to cancer earlier that year and was dealing with a loss alongside her addiction. All right, let's take a pause here. I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. I know that a lot of avoidant attachers often tend to get into these relationships where they may be playing a bit of a role of a savior or white knight and a bit of a rescuer, where they get themselves with people who are in very precarious situations where they try and help people and to support them because they like feeling needed, right? Not emotionally supportive. They just want to do a lot of acts of service sometimes and to support people. And I think there's genuine care from them too because they're well-intentioned and they want to obviously help out other people. However, like I've said consistently, a lot of avoidant attachers tend to find themselves getting embroiled in the issues of other people and not actually having true emotional depth with these individuals. And it's really another form of self-sabotage from them having not only lacking boundaries, it's also a way in which they don't normally allow themselves to get into relationships where they have to be vulnerable. They end up just getting quite distracted by tending to all these individuals where they somewhat feel guilty at the idea of not letting these people, work out their own issues and their own challenges. Although cancer, by the way, as a lot of you will know, is something where that can be highly terminal. But I do find a lot of avoidant attachers have a funny habit of like, there's a few things I want to state, and this is for fearfuls and dismissives, especially all of those that are dismissive leaning. There is a tendency for a lot of them to get themselves into situationships and relationships where there might be a deadline. There might be and this doesn't extend just to relationships. This can also be work things as well, too, where they know there's like a end to it because then that way they know that they're going to be released at some point. They don't have to have true commitment. There is a tendency for them to be overly invested in people who are struggling with something. And it's, again, it is not to say that they're doing this, maliciously. I think they genuinely do care about helping those that are in, pain. However, their emotional capabilities, as I said before, are not usually that strong. So they often lead with a lot of acts of service. And I think that whilst their intentions may be good, there can be a tendency for them to use this as a way of seeking out external validation to help them feel like a good person. And I think this is also to soothe that shame wound of being a bad person. And lest we forget, struggling with an alcohol addiction, that is huge. I know for a lot of individuals who've not maybe been familiar with addiction, they might think, oh, maybe it's not a big deal. But when you're an addict, your first love is your substance. You ain't ever going to have the space or the bandwidth to be giving your total, intimacy to another human being when you're abusing substances. So already I feel sorry for Sarah because you don't usually have an addiction. You're not usually born with an addiction. You know, this is already sounding to me like she's got a lot of stuff going on that probably led her to this path. And I worry that it might be to soothe a lot of her own, self-worth, shame, and other stuff. Because usually, as it comes out in 12-step recovery programs for like, Alcoholics Anonymous, that's what we usually see. So yeah, I'm already feeling like, oh, this is setting the scene for some trouble to come. Anyways, let's continue with Liam's story. He writes, our conversations grew deeper, though not romantic at first. I believe I created a safe space for her, which she appreciated. She eventually decided to approach rehab and completed her first stint. Okay, good for her. Unfortunately, her sobriety didn't last, and she returned to rehab shortly after. This was all happening throughout the month of January to give some context. Oh, wow. Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot. So obviously she's done one round of rehab and that didn't last within such a short space of time. That's not sounding good. It sounds like she's highly dependent on alcohol to function. And I reckon I have a suspicion, some of you may have heard me say this before, but usually when you're an addict, you don't just have the one, you'll have multiple. So I wouldn't be surprised if her interest in the gym is maybe a secondary addiction and she uses that to cope with her emotional distress. I'm already getting a picture of Sarah having a lot of trauma going on. But let's continue. It was after her second rehab stint that our connection turned romantic. She was giving a good amount of obvious positive romantic signals toward me, and I also felt romantic interest in her. I highlighted my feelings not only through my behavior, but specifically verbally expressing them at least in two occasions in a clear manner. As I was aware by her comments during our previous conversations, she expected me, as a guy, to lead her and take control of the relationship and guide her through it, in the sense that we were displaying our masculine, feminine energies. All right, I'm going to take a pause here and say, um, okay, as a gay man, I find this whole masculine, feminine thing to be, I don't want to say outdated and sexist, but just kind of problematic in that I feel like a lot of people use that as a way of setting norms and ideas as to how people should show up in relationships. If you're a guy, you have to be assertive. You can't be emotional because that's the woman's role to be in her feminine energy. And she needs to allow herself to be spontaneous and playful. As the man, you must lead. Where I find it really peculiar because as someone who comes from, the LGBTQI plus community, sure, we may have different ideas of like gender, pronouns, and constructs around masculine and feminine energy. But I feel like in heteronormative dating, some of these ideas of trying to achieve polarity, they kind of get stretched a little bit too far. And I think they can actually cause problems because they're rooted in some very archaic ideas of how we're supposed to show up. And it's also maybe, let's just say, I've seen some people use this as a way of saying, if you don't show up this way, I may not find you attractive, right? So I already worry that, this might be the basis for, you know, Sarah having a very narrow band of what she expects in a guy. She's probably expecting you to show up in a very, I could almost imagine like a bit like a dad, to be very like assertive, protective, strong, lead the way. And if you sort of deviate from that path, I worry that she may find you, she may start to degrade you. So I'm not suggesting that she's someone who, again, is malicious. I don't think that, but yeah, I worry that this is, again, not necessarily a helpful framework for your relationship with her, Liam. Anyways, Liam writes, I match this energy to meet her expectations and to make my intentions undoubtedly clear. As a result, Sarah reacted in a positive way and even quickened the pace of her interest. And it seemed like she couldn't get enough of me. She texted and called all day long, with me fortunately having access to my phone due to my job. Sarah expressed quickly her amazement by saying, I can't believe I met someone like you. And we grew closer through our continuation of late night calls, texts, and dates. Although I'd already made my intentions pretty straightforward, Sarah never gave me a clear answer verbally in return, although her actions and behavior were evidently focused on our connection in a romantic way. This left me confused, and it was as if she wanted to enjoy each other's company and prevented to put any definition or a specific label on the connection. Sarah even introduced me to her daughter later into the connection, and it felt like we were building towards a serious relationship. A romantic connection with each other, a good personal relationship with her parents, pets, and even an introduction to her daughter. This was all through late January to late March 23. Can I say I'm already concerned about the fact that she has a daughter? Like, she sounds like she's quite a young woman from the sounds of it. And, she's already displayed the fact that she's an alcohol addict and she's a single mum. So to me, it sounds like I don't have a problem with people who are single parents, but I worry that she's no position to be in a romantic relationship because it's ironic for someone who I reckon will probably show out to be probably a fearful avoidant. She's got a lot of, commitments to substance abuse, fitness, a daughter. I'm just worried that this is, someone who just doesn't actually have the capacity to be fully available for you. And I find it not okay that, she doesn't seem to have the capacity to state, hey, I like where this is going. What do you think about us being in a relationship? It feels like she's wanting to have her cake and eat it too, and just expect you to show up in your masculine energy. So yeah, I'm already getting my spidey senses tingling with concerns. Even though our connection became deep, we never got intimate, as I firstly wanted to make sure this was an emotionally safe space for both of us, but also Sarah's confusing feedback held me off. Even when Sarah signaled to me her interest in her flirty behavior, I remained in a place of confusion but thought this would pass. I'm assuming you mean sexual intimacy in this one. Everything seemed perfect, her sobriety, our romantic connection, and a sense of hope. But then things took an unexpected turn. Oh dear. As I now know, the end of our connection began around my birthday, which was entering April, which we celebrated with bowling. Sarah brought me a card and a gift, and I decided to open the card later. The evening was bittersweet. While I was experiencing her playful, joyful side during air hockey, her inner child full of smiles and laughter, a beautiful experience overall, it seemed her frequent distraction on her phone during bowling left me feeling disconnected, stating the group chat from her gym was popping off. Later in my car, I opened her card, which read, when a friend becomes like a family member. This was jarring given the romantic tone of our previous conversations. My confusion must have been evident because the car ride home was tense. Sarah leaned in as if seeking a kiss, but I hesitated, still processing the card's message and honesty in a form of shock. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. She is definitely putting you into a friend zone in her head whilst trying to still have some degrees of physical and emotional intimacy. This is so controlling, Liam. I'm so sorry you're in this situation. This is so confusing. After that evening, Sarah became noticeably distant. Though our text still had romantic undertones, her engagement waned. We met a few times over the next few weeks, for context, the first 2 weeks of April 23rd, but the connection felt strained. Things escalated when Sarah mentioned a trip to the city. I praised her for wanting to get out there after her recent struggles. But what followed that day was a photo of her dogs at the beach with what was noticeably a man's arm in the photo, which unsettled me. It would unsettle me as well. Days later, I saw a stranger's vehicle in her driveway and eventually saw her with another man. Oh, this is so not okay, Liam. I'm so sorry you're going through this. This is bullshit. I decided to confront her through text and asked to meet for a walk. During our conversation, I directly asked if she was dating this guy. Good on you. Her only response was, I don't know. Oh. This lack of clarity frustrated me as the situation seemed obvious, yet she denied providing any answers. I feel like I would be frustrated too on your behalf, to be honest, Liam. Like the whole, I don't know. Like to me, when an avoidant attacher, severe or otherwise, says, I don't know, it can be really frustrating for people on the receiving end because on one hand, they may genuinely not know, but I think also it's their way of avoiding any accountability for their actions as well, too. Like if you ask them, hey, where is this behavior coming from? I don't know. And it can be really frustrating because it can feel like you're talking to a child who isn't really taking any accountability for why they ate all the cookies from the cookie jar. So, yeah, this is annoying to say the least. And I also think it's highly disrespectful. The card, the concentration on her phone when you were trying to have an intimate night out for your birthday, Liam. Her seeing this guy and introducing him so suddenly, by the way, after she started, distancing herself from you. I feel like a lot of this is designed to control the intimacy between you. Hardcore. Anyways, on the walk, she came across hesitant and deflective in her body language. I sensed she didn't like the conflict and really couldn't express and couldn't express herself in such a situation. I spent days sitting in a place of confusion. What had just happened? So I decided to send her a text asking for her input. Why was it that this seemingly close connection ended in the way it did? She read the message but never replied, only to then, a couple of days later, call me to tell me she was at one of our local walks and there were dead birds close to the water's edge. I felt like I was in a simulation. No mention of my text or our experience. Can I just say it's also interesting that she decides to mention the dead birds? You know, I worry that people I worry that a lot of people who've obviously suffered a lot of extreme trauma and also have big shame wounds, there can be a tendency for them to fixate on the worst possible things. And for those of you that are familiar with the reticular activating system, the RAS, it's basically a term used to describe how our brain, if you say, for instance, don't look at a yellow car or don't think of like a pink elephant, it will start to focus on those things. Or for instance, if you have like a negative view, like, everyone leaves me, it basically fuels that confirmation bias because you're going to start looking for evidence to show that there are people out to get you and that you are going to be constantly left and disappointed by others, right? So the reticular activating system in this context feels like she's deciding to talk about dead birds, and it's a nice distraction from talking about the issues that you were actually texting her about. And I could imagine you would probably been like, what the fuck is going on? Like, Sarah, are you broken? Like, what's happening? And by broken, I mean, like, are you okay? Are you like, is something going on with, your communication? That kind of broken. I don't like the term broken to describe people. I find it highly offensive. But I mean, it's like as if a toy who's been manufactured is suddenly just not working as intended. I can imagine for you, Liam, you'd have been like, what the fuck is going on? I've had this happen to me before. It's not fun. But yeah, I've seen avoidance do this as well too. Those are on the sphere end, particularly when they're focusing on, hopelessness, loss. And so, yeah, odd that she decided to, point that out. Anyways, this experience broke our bond as I felt emotionally cheated on. Yeah, well, actually, I was going to say, I think it's more than emotional cheating, Liam. Sarah became distant, focusing solely on her new relationship. Yet she would continuously reach out through a 10-month relationship, starting just 3 weeks into a new connection, even asking me to walk her dogs. She later admitted it was a way to see me. While our interactions carried a hint of the past, I kept my distance out of respect for her relationship. Yeah, this is her having a relationship and wanting to have her cake and eat it too. I was going to say, I thought this was going to be someone who was a fearful avoidant, but I'm actually going to say she's a dismissive avoidant. Like, I got to say, even though, she's displaying, she's obviously an alcoholic, she's, got a lot of, internalized stuff going on. I'm sensing more dismissive avoidant vibes than fearful avoidant vibes in this one, I got to be honest. But maybe she's a dismissive leaning, fearful avoidant, but I really feel like the DA is strong in this one. And I'm really so sorry for you. This is so unfair. I've seen a lot of this happen to people where, just as they're escalating the relationship, a dismissive avoidant who's severe in their attachment style will basically exit the relationship by entering a new one without actually having any proper closure or conversation around it. And it's so unfair because it's like, and it's also deep betrayal. It's breaking the sanctity of a relationship. It's like, you can't just go off to a new relationship without ending this one. You actually have a degree of obligation here. So, no, this is terrible. Anyways, I also don't like the fact that she's also still maintaining a degree of interaction with you after this is all done and dusted, because it sort of feels like she's trying to almost, still have that emotional accessibility from you without actually reciprocating properly. And she's got this guy who's now sort of stuck in between the two of you. So that way she can have the physical component with him where she probably doesn't really have the same degree of connection with him, yet she gets to still be with you because it feels safe at that distance. Not okay. Anyways, her new partner eventually approached me randomly during a walk, introducing himself with, "You must be Liam. I've heard a lot of good things about you." It left me puzzled about what was being said behind closed doors. Oh, she must be talking a lot about you because she hasn't emotionally gotten over the fact that she has feelings for you. The emotional fallout from this hit me hard. I cried for days and took weeks to regain regulation. That's when I found you, Ken. Learning about attachment theory was pivotal. It explained the depth of my pain and illuminated how she may have been an avoidant. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Who deactivated. But what this experience highlighted in myself was how I had unconsciously revisited patterns from childhood, where I played a role with my mother who also struggled with alcohol. Ah, that's profound insight. Well done. Sarah's relationship lasted 10 months, and I'd spent a significant amount of time healing and learning psychology, which gave me a great understanding of why this experience played out the way it did. Sarah and I reconnected soon after her relationship ended. This time, the connection lasted only 2 months. It ended with her bringing her ex-partner back into her life. Of course. This felt like a pattern. Whenever we grew emotionally close, she would retreat by involving someone else. You got it. During following connections, for context, this was just over a year since our first connection, Sarah was more forward, even telling me in a vulnerable moment that I was the one and that her past relationship hadn't worked out because, quote unquote, those other guys weren't you, amounting to other statements such as, I guess I just didn't feel worthy of you, and getting with, filling the blank in with her ex-partner's name was easier. I didn't want to push you away. I just thought you were unreachable. I have so many trauma bonds that I can't resonate with. Wow. Despite these words, her actions created a cycle of push and pull, leaving me unable to connect fully as she continuously closed off or sought comfort elsewhere. These following connections between the two of us seemed full of frustration from Sarah, stating, I'm available now. Why don't you just take the relationship? My reply to Sarah was that I didn't feel emotionally safe due to the previous connection ending in such a brutal manner. Within this conversation, I brought up details of her past connection and how her actions caused great pain. Sarah quickly jumped in with, quote unquote, why do you keep talking about the past? It's time to forget the past. Restating, I'm here, take the relationship with me. I stood my ground on how I felt, knowing that she wasn't taking any accountability or had even seemed to reflect. We remained in each other's lives for a while longer, and during this stage, Sarah sent me TikTok videos through personal message. It seemed like this was Sarah's way of communicating. A few examples of these videos were Mel Robbins' quote of, it's got nothing to do with you. It has to do with their pain, their trauma, their coping mechanisms. Oh, Jesus. This was a heartfelt moment because it felt like it was a type of acknowledgement I wanted from the very start, which was, some basic awareness. Can I just say for you, Liam, I really don't like the fact that she's just sent that to you because I feel like that's a really crappy way of communicating, a lot of her own stuff. And also very selfish. It's like, girl, I don't give a shit or a fuck if you have coping mechanisms and you're trying to depersonalize it. I'm going to say this for everyone listening. You are allowed to feel personalized by this behavior, all right? Like you may get to a point where you later realize, oh yeah, it had nothing to do with me. But in the moment, revel in that pain, knowing that, yeah, this behavior is bullshit and it's not fair. Because when you can see the forest from the trees, you'll be able to detach yourself from it eventually, and you'll be able to obviously learn to do so with other future bad behavior. But in the moment, you have every right to be like, this behavior hurts, and I don't like the way it's being done to me. Because, at this stage, all it seems like that's happening to Sarah is that she just decides to basically fuck off and get with a new guy anytime you get close. So, not okay. It's very manipulative too. It's like, bro, Liam, you've got like a life you can lead outside of this. Like, let Liam go, girl. Like, let him just have his life. Don't fuck him around like this. Anyways, without sounding like Fergie from Don't Funk With My Heart, the other thing that Sarah was also sending were voice quotes, stating things like, there's one person I'm not giving up on, whatever we go through. And do you ever look at the person and think, wow, how have I landed you in my life? We're currently in no contact, but our final meetings to me put a lovely end to our connection. Walking with the dogs, expressing what seemed to be our inner child, moments I will likely never forget. The whole experience has left me wondering if I am the one who got away. I'm going to tell you now, Liam, on behalf of you, I'm going to say um, two things. I personally believe that, yes, you are the one that got away and she self-sabotaged hardcore. But I also want to sympathize with both of you and say, in the moment, and maybe even to this day, you have doubts about that and feel like she was the one that got away. Because, even as I was reading this, I could understand, maybe feeling quite helpless and also, feeling that this beautiful connection where neither of you seem to get all that physical, right? You were in a situationship that had a lot of emotional tenderness there, right? It would be very easy for you to feel as though you really didn't get much out of this relationship because at all, even if it wasn't a relationship, because she got with a guy for 10 months. She got with a guy where it seemed like it was a proper relationship and you were given the scraps. Now, even though we know, based on what she said, which is consistent with the language of avoidant attaches, it does seem like her connection with you seemed much more significant than it did with this guy that she seemed to be just using as filler whenever she was feeling too close to you. However, I think that in our society, we tend to look at romantic relationships with a higher degree of respect than we do for situationships for understandable reason. And it can be very easy to then think, well, I feel like I barely got anything of her and she still seems like the one that got away because, she wasn't that into me. When I'd say, I can understand where you're coming from if you've ever thought that. And at the same time, I just don't think she was brave enough to actually allow herself to be fully, invested in this relationship with you, Liam, because she was scared. And I bet that guy that she was with didn't have a very big emotional bond. I don't imagine it would have been that deep compared to what you both had with each other. She may have liked the guy, but I don't think she probably, had that same connection she had with you. And I just think this is so unfair on you. It's sad for her because it seems like she's got huge intimacy issues. I feel sorry for a child because it doesn't sound like the poor kid's going to have a stable sense of, what normal life is like. And that's just generational trauma right there, right? In any case, Liam says, instead of any questions, I'd like to approach this a little differently by highlighting to you, the listeners, that you're amazingly loving folk, and these dynamics may well awaken you to the parts of you that need some nurturing, but be proud of who you've shown yourself to be, because that's you. Thanks, Ken. Oh, I want to echo that. Thank you so much, Liam, for writing this. Honestly, for those of you that have listened today or listened to any of these, I completely agree with Liam. Like, truthfully, when I started posting videos on this, I wasn't expecting to create like such a warm, loving community where they're all sharing stories of this. And I know everyone's story is slightly different, but I think we can all resonate with the fact that we've all been there, we've loved deeply with these people. And like I've said even today in one of my posts, avoidant attaches are still worthy of love. Hell, if they were able to elicit this great, love from you, they've obviously done something right. And I think that even though they obviously have a lot of painful, self-defensive mechanisms, I do believe that it's one of those things where you didn't fall in love just with the self-defensive stuff. You got in love with someone who showed you some great time and connection with each other. And I've had, nebulous relationships like this before where they have been situationships that have been defined by a strong emotional connection. And it's been bloody confusing if you're looking at it from a traditional, lens. But I find if you understand attachment theory, it's like, now I can see where people like Sarah are coming from. But Liam, she's got so much work that she needs to do on herself. It's insane. Anyways, I'm going to round this out by saying thank you, Liam, for sharing this today. And I hope that you have a wonderful day for those of you that have listened to this. For those of you that are interested in submitting a letter, please be aware that the submissions will open up again in about mid-January when I'm back from holidays. I'm still working through the December batch. And I very much look forward to doing the next letter reading, which will be tomorrow. So I will catch you around then.